4 types of men you should never marry. And if you see any of the red flags, you should go running because it's going to ruin your life. Welcome back to our podcast. We're happy to be here with you today. Today, we're talking to you about the 4 types of men you should never marry. And if you see any of the red flags that we're talking about today, you should go running because it's going to ruin your life.
At our last Profitable Connections networking event, one of your interns came over to me and said, Denise, how can you do divorce law for such a long time? It's so depressing.
I don't think it's depressing because I think divorce law allows people to move on with their lives and have a better version of their life afterwards. Because if they're stuck in a relationship that there's no love, they're not happy, they're just in a bad mood every single day, that's sad. I think it's much happier when they get to move on with their lives and be the best version of themselves, and their partner can move on and be the best version of themselves. And if they don't have the opportunity to move on, then I think that's a sad situation.
I agree. And I consider it that I am helping people to live their best lives. There are so many things that they've cut themselves off from, and now they get the opportunity to remake themselves, to put into their life all the love, all the laughter, everything that they had prevented themselves from before. So I consider it totally inspirational, and I love the opportunity to help people.
Yeah, I love the opportunity to help people as well. That's why I like this type of a job, because it's so fulfilling. You get to put people in a much better position than when you found them.
Right.
And I think the two of us, the reason why we get along so well, we have the same philosophy about life, about how you treat clients, and we both like to see the future for them and to see what is possible for them and how much better their lives are going to be.
Right. And we have to love them just a little, not be their mothers, because they need someone who's going to help them to be rational and practical in moving forward. But they need somebody who's on their side, and that's us. So now let's move on to the 4 red flags. The 4 red flags, the 4 men. If you see them before you get married, run in the other direction. The first one is going to be the financial disaster. I have been giving talks to high schools for such a long time, and I tell the students, look in his or her wallet, and if they have 7 cards, and every time they're going to pay a bill, they look at each of the credit cards in order to see which one they're going to use. That is somebody who has so much debt. You do not want someone with an enormous amount of debt to be married to, because instead of paying $2,000 a month for rent, $4,000 a month for rent, they're paying $2,000 to $4,000 a month on credit cards. It's just not sustainable. And you need to make sure that you have somebody who is financially stable, even starting out in marriage. Kelly Clarkson sings Beautiful Disaster about this guy who is just a total disaster. Have you had them in your practice?
Absolutely.
Recently?
Yeah, absolutely. I see it all the time. Now, I tend to have clients who are the more affluent ones in the relationship, but overall, even if they're more affluent, that doesn't mean that they're not a disaster. And they can be a disaster in many different areas of their life. Now, even if they're making a lot of money or have a lot of money, they can still be a financial disaster.
Because they spend more than they make. And
Exactly.
Every time it's boats and planes and fancy cars, more and more and more. So that's what they do with all the extra money, and then they end up a financial disaster.
Exactly. And they end up with nothing in savings. And it's a complete train wreck. They don't provide for their families. They don't provide for their spouses. They can't take care of themselves. And it's all about greed.
And the women who decide that they're going to put their lives in these people's hands, because if he's making more money and she's making less money, she is going to concede to him and say, you can make all the financial decisions. And 10 years later, they're in debt, broke, and bankrupt. And she didn't assert herself to say, Don't buy that extra car. We don't need to move up to a larger yacht.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They need to be equally responsible. You need to make sure that both people are on the same page financially. And this is something that people need to discuss when they're dating. And if they aren't on the same page about money, it's one of the biggest red flags that can happen in terms of a relationship. And it always leads to a breakup or divorce.
And there are some couples who they have separate bank accounts, and one can be the spender and the other can be the spendthrift. And what happens when they get divorced is all of a sudden there's a surprise. He has $60,000 in savings. And what happens is they have to split it.
Absolutely. And the person who is actually saving and responsible is the one who's penalized by the other one digging them deeper and deeper into debt. And I've seen people getting into debt for failed business ventures that they didn't bother to look into. That's a very common one. For, as you said, planes, boats, all sorts of other, cars, different kinds of toys. Just completely irresponsible people who have no idea what they spent the money on. I've seen people who make a lot of money and repeatedly are in bankruptcy.
Right.
I've had one client that I handled several divorces for that had 2 bankruptcies. One bankruptcy for divorce, and that client called me again and is headed towards a 3rd bankruptcy. It's a train wreck. So there's some people that just don't know how to manage themselves, and they usually lack self-control.
Make sure that he's not a financial disaster who's just spending everything, because even with a prenup, he's going to drag you down.
One of the clues you can look for when you're deciding whether or not you're with a financial disaster, the guy has the flashy car, he's got the flashy watch that you said, he's got the flashy house. You walk into his house and there's no furniture. That's a huge red flag. He spent all of his money out partying and on other things.
Now let's move on to the second red flag, the second disaster.
So the second type of red flag, and this is a very troublesome one because it spins people out of control all the time, is the chronic cheater. And I see this very often in a lot of divorces. And I'll tell you this, if he cheats once, he's going to cheat again. And we've looked at a lot of statistics on cheating and divorce, and there are a lot of couples, surprisingly high amount per the American Psychological Association, that reconcile after they've been cheating. About 60 to 70% of these couples get back together. But the problem that they don't understand is that unless there are steps taken to solve the underlying problems, like the overall insecurity or whatever issue caused the person to cheat, they'll oftentimes become a chronic cheater. And there are some people who are just sex addicts, and they're just chronic cheaters. And this is a huge red flag. And this causes tons of stress because infidelity isn't really considered very much in the context of divorce cases. Everyone wants to bring it up, but it's very rare that the courts actually let you bring it up. The courts will only consider it to the extent that one spouse has wasted marital assets on another party, and they'll allow you to recover half of the money that was spent. And I have a lot of clients that will try to go down a rabbit hole trying to prove that the other party was cheating, what they were doing, how they were doing it, and they just can't get past the cheating.
And it devastates the partner. It just devastates the partner. And of the 60% who try to reconcile, I would say that at least another 20%. So there's 40% that didn't want to reconcile, plus another 20% who find that reconcile, it's just not working. Reconciliation is not working because the person is just not trustworthy. And trust is the basis of a good marriage.
And you know what? If they're cheating in one aspect of their life, they're probably cheating in others. You don't want this person as your business partner. You don't want to be in a card game with this person.
Right. There's no trust. And where there's no trust, there's no relationship, there's no marriage. And you have to understand that. So when these little things happen, before you get married, you have to keep your antenna up and make sure that you know that the person that you're going to marry is trustworthy. Now, let's move on and let's talk about the man-child. This is someone who you are going to become their mother. You are going to be the one who is resented for being the adult in the relationship. You are going to not only have 3 children, you're going to have 4 children because the 4th child is your husband.
I've made the mistake of dating a man-child before, and it's terrible. And you've got to run from this because it's just going to be a horrific situation.
And you're going to be resented for being the adult in the relationship. You're going to have to work 3 times as hard. For what? Make sure that the person that you're married is responsible and doesn't just little by little let you be the one who takes care of everything.
And there are different red flags to look for in this situation because they might start off seeming like they're responsible and they want to put out their best foot forward, but you need to really dig in to find out who they are to see if they're really a man-child and if they're responsible or not. And you should know that you're going to be the one stuck paying the bills. You're going to be the one who's stuck dealing with spousal support if you end up divorcing them. It's going to be a mess.
Mm-hmm. And what happens is that this is the man that you want to take care of. This is the man that you want to help. This is the man. You don't want to marry the horse trainer. You don't want to marry the guy who doesn't have a house, who goes from place to place. You don't want to be the one who helps them, who pays for his or her education. You don't want to be the one who is always giving, giving, giving. That is not a marriage. That is being someone's mother to a man-child or to a female child. You don't want to do that. You want an adult to marry, not a child.
Now, the last type can be one of the worst as well, the control freak. And you never want to marry a control freak. That person is financially controlling, emotionally controlling, sometimes even physically controlling, and that can get kind of scary. And this guy decides they have to make all the decisions, they have to be 100% in control, and it's a security issue. They're very insecure. And we see a lot of domestic violence situations involving the control freak. And I've been on both sides of restraining orders and criminal cases involving domestic violence, and there are a lot of issues, and you want to go running and screaming from this situation.
And so it is usually it's the husband who wants to make sure that his wife doesn't have a dime and has to ask for everything, doesn't have keys to the car, isn't able to make a single financial decision, and then take the keys away, can't leave the house. We're talking about a situation of total and utter control that makes the person into a puppet. And they're afraid to say anything because their, quote, privileges are going to be taken away. It definitely leads to domestic violence. But the emotional part, the emotional destruction is worse than any physical violence. Clients tell us that all the time. Someone who now puts you down and says, you're worthless, you're the one who hasn't done anything, I'm the only one who does it. This is our 4th. The control freak is someone who, it starts early. It starts very early, taking away your choices, making your choices. You think that, oh, this is a real man who's really masculine, going to take care of me. But over time, it becomes a disaster. It becomes controlling and unbearable.
But they don't seem to start off that way exactly. What they usually do, they're great manipulators, and they'll say, oh, let me take care of the bill. Let me take care of ordering. Let me take care of this. And then they start heading down the rabbit hole and getting much worse. And, marriage really should be a partnership, not a prison sentence.
And when you start out, before you get into a relationship like this, you need to ask about the prior relationships. And if they talk down and talk nasty about the person, their prior wives, their prior girlfriends, make sure you listen carefully because that's going to be you.
And if you see these red flags, don't ignore them. Make note and go running from them because there are plenty of other men out there and there's no reason to saddle yourself with this type of a problem. You're never going to end up happy from that.
And our clients tell us it is better to be without a man than having someone who is emotionally and physically hurting them. So make sure you make a wise choice, and you have to investigate whoever it is that you are going to be marrying.
Now, if you think that we missed a type, what we were talking about, the red flags today, send us a DM and tell us the type of man that you would never marry. And we'd love to talk about that.
Right. Or put a comment. We'll read your comments.
And marriage is a contract. Make sure you read the fine print.